Alright guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we are going to be bleeding the coolant system on my 340i. I've made a video on this a couple years ago showing you guys how to do it, just doing the in-car method, how you can kind of manually turn on the water pumps. But you guys asked me to basically update that video to use the vacuum bleed method because that's the one that BMW uses, and it is a much faster and quicker method to get this done. And the good news is I do have a vacuum bleed kit. I've used it a couple times and it is a lot faster. So I'll show you guys how I do it in this video, as well as talk about, how you can pick a setup for yourself to make this work. But yeah, we just swapped the turbo and the oil filter housing on my car, so there's no coolant in it. And now we need to go ahead and top off our cooling system. So I'll show you guys how it's done, and hopefully you guys find this video useful. Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. Now, the reason why this is important, especially for you guys with the TU engines, is you don't have this coolant line that's coming off of the top of your intake manifold. And this is really important. I don't know why BMW got rid of it, but with the intake manifold being basically the highest point on your cooling system, it's above the coolant tank. It makes it really easy for air to get trapped in here. And when I did this intake manifold upgrade, I was actually experiencing some higher IATs, and I realized it was because some air was trapped inside the intake manifold. So I was able to bleed the system. I used this tool to make sure I sucked all the air out, and that got my IATs down. But especially if you guys have a TU engine that doesn't have that bleeder hose on top of the intake manifold, it's really easy to get some air stuck in there. So that's the main reason why this is really important, especially for those of you guys. But also, like I said, it's faster and just an easier way to fill up your cooling system. So let's go ahead and take a look at the kit I got. All right, so this is the kit that I use. Definitely not saying it's the best kit by any means. It's just the one that I saw somebody else use. Got it from Amazon myself, and it worked great on our cars. So I will have my Amazon link down in the video description in case you're interested in getting this as well. But here's how it looks. And the concept is pretty simple. So this is going to mount inside of your coolant tank, basically right on the opening. And then you add this little valve on the side, and so this just snaps in, and you're going to attach air supply here, and the air that is flowing through here will come out this side, and that will basically pull a vacuum through this pipe. So with this sealed onto your coolant tank, it's going to pull a vacuum on your cooling system. Now once you get it full, you turn this valve off that keeps the vacuum inside, and you switch this out for this hose, and this again just plugs right in, and you're going to put this coolant line inside of a jug full of coolant, and then when you open this back up, it's going to suck all the coolant into the cooling system. So this is obviously much faster than just filling it and doing the bleed process 3 or 4 times. This basically automatically sucks all the coolant in, so it goes in within like 20 seconds. And it makes sure that you minimize how much air you need to bleed out of your cooling system. So it's really, really convenient once you make it work. Now, I will say there are a couple pros and cons to this. One big one is it's kind of hard to get this to seal. It has a couple different adapters down here. And so you basically slide it on. And then when you're tightening this basically pulls or like pushes out on this bottom part to make it seal up. So I had trouble getting that to work really well, like really consistently. So what I do is I basically just turn this all the way and make it like as wide as possible, and then push it into the opening on my coolant bottle, and that makes sure that this is as sealed up as possible. So just keep that in mind. If you run this and you see like vacuum dropping or something like that and it's not sealing up, it's probably because you installed this into the coolant tank and then turned it trying to get it to seal up. For me, it was easier to turn it outside of the tank and push it in to get that kind of pressure fit. The other thing I know some people won't like about this, and I'll just address it up front, is there's a lot of concern about sucking in air into the cooling system. So when you first connect this hose, obviously there's a whole bunch of air in it. And when you turn it on, the air gets sucked in front of the coolant, and then the coolant goes into your cooling system. I don't think that's the end of the world personally, because you're going to be bleeding the cooling system anyway. But there are some other kits out there that take that into account. And so it has extra valves, so you can kind of pre-fill this hose and suck the coolant in there before you actually open the main valve to pull the coolant into the car. So again, do whatever you prefer. This has worked great for me. There are plenty of different ones out there. And yeah, I'll just have the link down in the description if you guys want to follow and do exactly what I've been doing. But let's go ahead and show you how it works on my car. So the first thing that you want to do is pick the right adapter for the circuit that you're going to fill up. The two different coolant tanks have different size caps, so that means they're each going to require a different size adapter. So you won't be able to use the same one in both tanks, but just kind of test fit them, find the biggest one that still fits in the cap, and then that should work for you. So go ahead and install the adapter into the opening of the cap and twist it until it seals. Again, what works for me is to basically pull it out, tighten it a little bit more so that it pushes it out a little bit, and then push it down onto the coolant tank, and that'll make sure you get the best seal possible. Then at this point, we're going to go ahead and connect the air supply, and yes, you do need an air compressor to make this work. So if you have one, connect it onto this adapter, and then you're going to turn it on. You want to have at least 75 psi of pressure to help you pull the vacuum that you need. Then once it's running, go ahead and open up that valve, and this is going to begin building vacuum pretty quickly. You want to let it pull until it's about 20 to 25 inches of mercury. Mine stopped around 25 inches, so that's when I shut it off. So at that point, close the valve, turn off the air, and then you're just going to kind of watch the vacuum. You want it to stay steady, and that will indicate that you don't have any leaks in the system. BMW recommends doing it for 30 seconds, but I would do it for a little bit longer. Honestly, when I was trying to get bubbles out of my coolant system, I just left it overnight. So whatever works for you, but basically you should not see that vacuum level dropping. Now, again, if you do hear like a really loud hissing and it's not holding at all, it's very likely that it's just leaking past the actual adapter. So make sure that's properly seated before you go chasing your tail looking for a coolant leak. Also, you can just look at the hoses. They'll probably be sucked closed so you can see them like basically collapsed under vacuum. So that'll give you a good indication that the vacuum is holding properly. Now, once you've got that all set up, the vacuum is holding, go ahead and swap out the fitting for the one with the coolant hose. Then you want to get the coolant that you need. There are different capacities depending on the system that you're using and whether you have an automatic or manual transmission and stuff like that. So this will tell you how much coolant you want to have on hand depending on which system you're going to be filling up. And then go ahead and put the hose into the bottom of a container with your 50-50 coolant mix. If you're going to use water wetter or any other additive, go ahead and add that in there too. And then when you put the hose all the way in the bottom of the container, open up the valve. Now here you can see I've basically got a gallon of coolant and it's sucking it down really quickly. So just make sure you have a backup on hand depending on how much coolant you need, and make sure that you've got a big enough jug, because otherwise it'll empty and you'll need to shut off the valve, switch to the next tank, and then begin, continue filling it up. Watch the pressure because it's going to drop as it gets closer to full, and you want to shut it off when it gets close to full. I can't exactly tell you where, but one of the kind of annoying things about this process is it does overfill your cooling system. So when you're done, you open up the cap and look, and you'll see that it's actually over the maximum mark. And even in the BMW manual, it tells you just to suck out the coolant that overfilled it. So they know it's going to happen. It's kind of annoying, but not really, the end of the world. So grab your turkey baster, suck out any extra coolant so that it drops down to the max level, and then go ahead and put the cap back on. Now you're going to want to do this for both circuits. Again, just swap adapters depending on the one that you're filling, and then close both caps. And now we're ready to do the portion that you do inside the car. The first one that you want to do is for the low temp circuit. So again, that's your smaller reservoir and the system that's connected to your intercooler and your air conditioning. To make this one turn on, we're basically going to turn on the ignition. Don't turn on the engine. Just turn it on, running on the battery. Turn on your low beam. Don't leave it in auto. You need to, physically turn it over to the low beam setting and turn on your hazard warning lights. Set the heat on your AC to the maximum temperature and put the blower to the lowest fan setting. So again, don't leave it in auto. You need to set it to the higher temp setting. So on my car, that's like 84 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the lowest blower setting. Then you're going to floor the accelerator pedal and hold it for 15 seconds. Keep your window open and you should be able to hear the water pump turn on. It's actually pretty loud. And once it starts running, you can release the pedal. Now at this point, the automatic routine will start and it's going to rev up and down. You'll hear the water pump ramp up and down and the water flowing through there. What I recommend is keeping your coolant cap on until the first sequence where it ramps up, gets really loud, and then it ramps back down and it kind of gets quiet again. With the coolant cap on, I found that it sucks down the coolant the fastest, and at that point you can open the cap and check to see if the coolant has dropped below the minimum level. And if it has, you can go ahead and top it off a little bit. There shouldn't be, a whole lot going on here. It might only take 1 or 2 times for you to top it off generally, but it just depends on how well you did the vacuum fill process. Also keep in mind while this is happening, the ignition must stay on, so don't turn off the car, and they also recommend not turning off your headlights or your hazard warning lights because those will prevent the car from going to sleep while it's just running on the battery, and this does run for about 11 minutes, so leave your headlights on, leave the hazard warning lights on, and that should make sure that it runs to the full complete process. Next, we're going to bleed the high temp circuit, and this one is going to follow a very similar process. The first thing that you're going to do is switch the ignition by pressing the start stop button 3 times. So you basically turn the ignition on, off, and then on again. Then again, go back and make sure that your heat is set to the maximum temperature at the lowest blower setting, and then floor the accelerator pedal for 15 seconds. This will initiate the automatic cooling system and you'll hear the water pump running again. Now, I know a lot of you guys asked about this in my previous video, and this does run both water pumps. So you'll see the low temp circuit flowing as well, but that's just to indicate to you that you've successfully turned it on. Now, at this point, you're going to go ahead and turn on the car, and you'll notice that your idle speed is elevated. It's idling at like 1200 RPM. And this is, again, normal. This indicates that you've started the bleed process properly and that it's doing what you want it to do. So let it run for a little while, and then they have this sequence where they recommend stepping on the accelerator pedal, revving up to 3500 RPM, and holding it for 10 seconds. And then after that, you lift and let it go back to idle for 30 seconds. So rev up to 3500, hold it for 10 seconds, then release. I have a big mental block doing this on a completely cold engine, so I only do it to around 2000 RPM. You do that 5 times, and then you release it and let the car hold idle. It'll hold idle again for about 11 minutes, and you'll know that the process is done when the engine idle speed drops down to normal, 600 to 700 RPM. Now, at this point, the engine probably still isn't up to temperature, so you're going to go ahead and top off your coolant just like you normally do, and then drive the car around, let it get up to temperature, let the thermostat open up and all that stuff. After that, park the car, let it sit and cool down, and then check your coolant levels again, and it should have dropped probably pretty significantly, and at that point you can go ahead and top off your coolant again. So that's just kind of how it works, and that will make sure that the cooling system is completely filled. And yeah, that's pretty much the process. So this shows you how to vacuum fill to make it happen a lot quicker. And then I'll go ahead and still do the manual water pump process that makes the water pumps run and fill up the rest of the system and bleed off the air. Hopefully this helps you guys out. Again, especially those of you with a TU engine that don't have the extra bleeder hose coming off your intake manifold. It can be pretty frustrating to get all the air out. If you still suspect that you have a pocket of air in your car, you can just attach the vacuum filler tool to your car put it under vacuum, hit that 25 inches of mercury and just let it sit. And if there is any air in the system, it'll pull it out. Like I said, I left it on my car overnight just to be safe. And then I checked it in the morning and the, vacuum level hadn't dropped. But that's a really good way to burp out or get out any extra air that might be in your system. So yeah, I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.